PodCham Pod.
Welcome back to the PodCham Pod. Happy Druish New Year. So I think maybe Rosh Hashanah was on my mind, but I was texting with Max. We were talking for a second about possible segments. I was like, how about just NBA dinner party? Guys you want to be at a table with for myriad reasons. Before we get into that, how are you?
I'm good. I know some listeners might be patiently waiting on the conclusion of the top 50 players. We've got top 10 coming this coming weekend with hopefully a special guest. And before then, to drum up a little bit more drama and suspense, we thought we'd throw this fun episode at you guys.
Yeah. All right. So was there one name on your list that like rose above the others, or just a good place to start?
So I guess first, I probably spent way too much time thinking about this, but at least what I'd want out of an NBA dinner party, or just a dinner party in general. But I wanted a good source of humor.
Yeah.
You got to have someone who can tell good stories. I don't know if you've ever seen the Curb Your Enthusiasm, where he talks about someone being the middle at a dinner party and how you need to have someone in the middle of the table who's like up to the task of being able to steer the conversation and bring up new conversation topics and stuff. So I wanted to have a good middle. And then just sort of, general, maybe someone who's boisterous, people who are going to bring stuff, like literal stuff, was something that I thought about. So yeah, I can get into it.
Yeah, I think I thought about the same criteria. The only thing that you didn't mention that was weighing heavy on my mind is like, who do we have very little access to? Like, who can I play this trump card with, because I'm never going to see them in public, or they're never going to do much media. So if I can get them in a room, maybe I can get some scoops that I would not otherwise have access to.
Interesting. Okay, that's not something I considered, but I'm curious to see who you put down for that.
Yeah. All right, but you start.
Yeah. So my first pick, he's my favorite player in the league. It's Giannis. I think he's extremely funny, so he's going to bring the humor element. Someone who's grown up in Greece and the upbringing that he had, his sort of multicultural background between Greece and Nigeria, coming to the US at a young age. I just think he'd be a great guest. He wouldn't like impose himself too much. He'd know when it's time to leave. I wouldn't have to worry about any of that with him. And I think he would just keep the conversation light. So he was the first guy. He's not gonna be my middle, because I don't think he's like, boisterous and gonna instigate, but I definitely want to have him there.
Yeah, I live in a studio and I'm worried he'd bring his brothers and I wouldn't have enough chairs, but I can't argue against Giannis. I think he's just the fact that he's the best player in the league. I was like, let me keep him off the list. I knew you'd try to bring him into the conversation, but yeah. Definitely a guy I want to bull with on a Friday night. Okay, I'll just go off that. I'll give you the best basketball player I had on my list.
Okay,
which was Kawhi Leonard.
I knew you were gonna say Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah. Because I'm not trying to have the most lit night. I'm trying to learn some things about the human condition. I want to understand this man, Kawhi Leonard, whom January Jones pines for on Instagram, and I don't think he's on Instagram, and he probably doesn't even know that January Jones is chasing him on social media. I
heard it here first, Kawhi.
I have so many questions about Kawhi, and there's some information about his past on the internet. He definitely didn't have the easiest upbringing, but outside of that, just like, I'm fascinated by someone who's able to stay so quiet in a time where everyone is so damn loud. And and also as someone who talks way too much, like, I just have the utmost respect for a guy whose work does all of the talking. And maybe, just maybe, if he has a couple glasses of red, we'll see a little bit of what's under the hood. Doubtful, but still, I think just the fact that I could be in a room with a small group and Kawhi Leonard's one of those guys is not an opportunity I could pass up.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of a couple glasses of red, on my next guy is going to check a lot of boxes. Most importantly, the will bring stuff, because I think he's going to bring some excellent bottles of wine, and that is Draymond Green.
Yeah.
And I also think he's just the ultimate middle in the dinner party table. Like that's basically the role he plays in the Warriors offense, where he's kind of setting the table for everyone, pun not intended. But just having him in there, if the conversation's ever dying down, he might make some borderline comment about someone else at the table that gets it going. He certainly has stories from growing up, and there's just sort of a minimal filter on him. So I just kind of feel like he'll loosen everything up. He'll get people to feel more comfortable saying what's on their mind, and I think will generally contribute to a fun night. Was he at your party as well, or no?
He wasn't, just because Draymond is omnipresent online. And it was like what I said about the access thing. I just feel like I get a lot of Draymond, and as much as I'd love to hang out with him, I feel like I know what I'm getting. And so that's why, yeah. In terms of Kawhi too, I think it's just fascinating when there's a guy who might speak the least at the table, but still commands a certain level of respect, just because these are all guys from the basketball community. Every single guy in the league looks up to Kawhi on some level. And so I'm interested in that power dynamic of like the guy who imposes himself conversationally the least, but still holds major status in the room. Obviously, Draymond has both. He's going to be loud on the court and loud at the table.
Yeah. Might have to sub him out of the middle if he just starts taking over the conversation too much, but I'd probably start him there.
Yeah, it would be nice. Maybe you tell Draymond dinner's starting like 45 minutes later than it actually is, to get other people warmed up before he comes in guns hot.
Yeah, maybe. All right, you're number 2.
Okay, another guy. So I actually thought maybe we can get Kawhi liquored up with some big face coffee espresso martinis. And there's no big face coffee unless Jimmy Buckets is at the table. So
I had him written down. Yeah.
So Jimmy Butler, kind of defying my own logic before, like we definitely have a lot of access to Jimmy, but I think that there's a whole nother level to like the Jimmy you get behind closed doors. I want to know the stories behind his interviews with Rachel Nichols. I want to know if there's anything behind those memes, but if he wants to keep that private out of respect for her, I totally understand. But most of all, I just, Jimmy's one of my comic relief guys. And I think that if anyone can bring out Kawhi's half grin, it's Jimmy. And yeah. And I want to see what a guy of that intensity is like when he's letting his hair down, his new hairdo.
Yeah.
And I know that he's down for a good time. He definitely will have leads for places we could go after dinner.
Yeah, I had Jimmy written down in like my humor guys. I ultimately didn't end up going with him because I felt like I was getting a lot of what he brought to the, table from everyone else. Yeah. But good pick.
You only have so much ball.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ultimate off-ball player for my next pick, Klay Thompson. I know he's omnipresent, but everyone seems to love the guy, and I would just love to hang out with him for a night. Just sort of the effortless humor and ability to kind of laugh at himself and have other people laugh at him, I think would be really funny. And he just seems like someone who would just, everyone relax. He would sort of amplify everyone's time. He might bring some party favors and
might bring his dog.
Yep.
Might set off the smoke alarm.
Yep.
I think there's a wide range of outcomes for Klay, like at your dinner party, depending on how he's feeling on that particular night. You get like post-championship Klay, he might be getting really lit. He could also be like in the corner whispering with Kawhi about all the funny shit that Draymond's saying in the middle of the table.
I agree.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of a loophole, but like I put down Udonis Haslem. Just because that man is seen a lot. The Queen Elizabeth of the NBA needs to be at my dinner party because he's got Miami thrice stories. He's got the LeBron, he's got Dwayne Wade. He even has some Shaq stories for us. He's obviously been a part of Pat Riley's life for a long time. So we get those histories. We get some Spoelstra stuff. And I think that Haslem is just a very rare balance of like work hard, play hard. I think that he's still young enough, like, he's young in the real world and he can get down with us if, if he has a babysitter.
Mhm.
And I think that it would just be a really, really fun, that generation gap between him and some of the guys that are in their basketball primes that I want at my table.
Yeah, I thought about him as well. I think that'd be fun. Um, my next one I actually hadn't thought about previously, but I just thought of right now, and I want to make sure I don't forget him, is Steven Adams.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to need to have about a 4,000 square foot apartment to fit all these guys into
Yeah.
it. But Steven Adams, just for his sense of humor, his wit, just sort of bringing another cultural influence from New Zealand and sort of that whole other side of the world compared to what I already have at the table from mostly America and then Giannis. Um, he's just consistently one of the funniest people that I see. And also I have a weakness and soft spot for New Zealand humor, and just
Yeah.
basically every interview that I see with him, he cracks me up. So I think he'd be perfect.
I'd love to know if he's met Lord. But even if he hasn't, I think you might need to have like a separate dish for him. Like I just imagine whatever you're cooking is not going to be quite enough for him. You might need like an 100-pound like turkey leg at the end of the table for him to just like lick like a lollipop. Yeah,
It's
that's a
possible.
great call. I don't know how he
Yeah.
slipped my mind, but I
Yeah.
definitely had him.
Yeah.
Okay, this one is just because I need to know what the fuck happened to Markel Fultz. And I actually think this is the least fun one. Like I'm not proud of this choice. This is selfish. This is like I'm sitting at the corner that Markel is at, and I'm asking, and I'm in the most respectful way possible. I just need to know. Because Markel Fultz in 2022, like when it looks good, it still looks amazing. Like his
Yeah.
burst is rare. His handle, his size, his finishing at the rim, his touch when it isn't a jump shot. Like he still has so many of the tools that made him arguably the best prospect in his draft.
Yep.
And I was one of the suckers that had him at number one. And I want to understand the psyche of this man. Um, I want to know what happened. And maybe he's not going to talk about it, but maybe I can just get the slightest inkling of like what went wrong in Philadelphia for a guy who I thought was going to be like an all NBA guard for a lot of years. And it's still like he's in this weird period now where he's not a rookie. He's not like, a 30-year-old vet. Like there's still weirdly like a reasonable ceiling for him. And at the same time, like there's way too much going on in the NBA world to still be talking about Fultz. And
Yeah.
so like I haven't forgotten about you, Markel, and I want to talk.
Yeah. No, I love that pick. I was definitely one of the last people guarding Fort Fultz. And it's weird. It almost reminds me of when sort of Sean Livingston had the second phase of his career where he
Yeah.
became like this really effective player, but it took people a while to realize it just because of kind of the catastrophic injury that he had, and people had to come around to the fact that he wasn't going to be the super high upside player that everyone saw before the catastrophic injury. Of course, in Fultz's case, there wasn't like a catastrophic injury. It remains to, I guess, come out how much of his shoulder issue was really an issue versus a mental issue versus a combination of the two. But yeah, I think that's a great pick. I sort of worry for him because I feel like it'd be one of those situations where the rest of the group is talking and you just kind of have him cornered
Yeah.
at the back of the or at the end of the table, and he's like really trying to get out of the conversation. But
Yeah, I also would have to be careful because I could try. I might have a glass or two and get a little bit pushy, like trying to get into the past. And I know if I were him, I'd want to talk about anything but that. But
yeah,
it just, yeah, I think about his Washington mixtape all the time, and like I thought he was gonna be like a player of like Lillard-esque significance in the league.
yeah.
I'm still not over it.
I
I should have been higher on Tatum.
I still go back and watch his summer league highlights when he could still shoot. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, crazy.
So okay, so for my fifth guy, I've got so far Giannis, Draymond, Klay Thompson, and Steven Adams.
Yeah.
A lot of different ways I could go with this fifth spot. Couple retired guys who I can't choose but thought about if they were still in the NBA. I would say JJ Redick, but he's sort of with his podcast. I kind of feel like I'm at a dinner party with him once a week. So
Request denied.
yeah, my all time would be to have Manu at the dinner
Yeah,
party.
yeah.
Just because he'd bring that Argentinian slash European flair. He would bring some sort of dish or drink that no one had ever tasted or whatever. But since he's retired, I just put a little heart next to his name, but sadly cannot pick him, which leaves me with two options. One of them is kind of the closest thing I could find to Manu in the modern NBA. That's Danilo Gallinari, which I thought would be kind of an interesting one to throw in.
Okay.
And the other Serge Ibaka, and I can't decide which one.
Yeah.
I can't decide which way I want to go. Serge is going to bring some food that none of us have ever had, and not sure if we'll want to have or not. If you've ever seen his cooking show, and Gallo,
again? How hungry are you?
How hungry are you, Mafuzi chef?
Yeah, I like that because we've gotten like the tip of the iceberg with him, but like not like it was still like diplomatic cooking reality show Serge was. So let's get under the hood.
Yeah, he'd be great at your dinner party, I think, because he'd get Kawhi to open up a little bit.
Yeah.
But screw it, I'm gonna go Danilo Gallinari just because I kind of want to get that Western European flair in there.
Yeah.
And he seems like a very funny guy too in his interviews. He'll bring maybe a nice bottle of wine, some Italian food. And I just kind of want to learn more about him. He's one of my favorite Knicks. And yeah.
If it were to happen in the near future too, you'd be getting like an in his feels Danilo Gallinari. You just got the bad injury news. He might be bumming a cig indoors. But yeah, Gallinari. He also I can see a sense of humor on his face. I haven't seen many Gallinari interviews, but like the way he smirks after certain foul calls, the way his body language on the court, I can tell that he has a great personality. In terms of Manu, I thought he would be a perfect fit with like the 7-footers that you have at your table, because as you're saying, like you're gonna run out of space, and then Manu could be holding like 2 trays in both hands, like Euro stepping through the dining room to get around the trees.
I needed the presence of a guard, but I just couldn't think of one who had like a really sort of spice and dynamic personality to them. Like I thought of CJ McCollum, but he's also a little oversaturated, and Drew Holiday, but he's more of just seems like a very chill guy. Like I don't know how much he'd bring that sort of spice that I think Manu and Gallo could bring. So I'll go with Gallo.
Yeah. You leaned into like the really surreal experience of just having a bunch of men who are twice your size, like around you at the dinner table.
Yeah.
Like, some guys who are 6'4", 6'3", but like, yeah, you get Steven Adams and Giannis on your shoulders, and it's going to be quite an experience.
Yeah. I'll get a high chair.
The last guy that I had written down was Jeremy Sohan. Like I talked about the fun things that arise from the generation gap from like 40-year-old UD to 30, young 30s, guys like Jimmy, Kawhi, and then Fultz, I think, who's in his mid-20s. But Sohan is 19, if he hasn't turned 20 yet. I think he's 19. And I would really love to see like Sohan next to Haslam, because I think that, interestingly enough, like they have some tools in common, like their defensive commitment, and like Haslam, if he was 20 today, they'd be, like using him as a small ball 5. He'd probably have a lot more utility than he did during his prime in like the early 2010s. But yeah, and I just love Sohan's personality. I don't know what color his hair is going to be when he shows up. He has so many, like he has a crazy range of interests. We can talk anime. We can talk the millions of places he's lived, the coolest gyms he's played in like, dozens of different countries in Europe. And just what, like the little bits of pop he's gotten so far. And maybe even some Tim Duncan conversations as he enters the San Antonio cinematic universe. So so that's just me betting on Sohan's personality. I hope I haven't just fallen for like the 2022 draft circuit interviews that I've seen, but like he just seems like such an awesome, colorful, literally and figuratively guy. And I think that he would, while he would definitely be laughed at by the vets, I think they also respect the game tape, which says that he's just like a really tough, old school guy with a new school scaffolding.
All right. Okay, so my dinner party to review was Giannis, Draymond, Klay Thompson, Steven Adams, and Danilo Gallinari. And yours was Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, Haslam, Sohan, and
Fultz.
And Markelle Fultz in the
Yeah.
corner of the table being peppered with questions by Drew.
Before we conclude this shorter episode of the PodCham Pod, Max had an idea I really wanted to roll with. Just a quick, like, who in the league right now, if they're visiting your hometown team, are you going to pay to watch? And so it's kind of a matrix between who's the most fun in-person experience and also like who isn't breaking your bank.
First one, just right to the top of the mind, the one that inspired this exercise, the New Orleans Pelicans. I am going to be
Why didn't we just call
watching-
this Pelicans Wednesday, Thursday?
Yes, I am going to be watching so many Pelicans games next year. I live in the Bay Area, so when they come to play the Warriors, I'm probably going to be at the game. I love watching Zion. I'm very curious to see how all their pieces fit together between CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Zion, Valanciunas, the various young guys that they got last year, whether it's Trey Murphy, who seems like he's going to be a really good 3-and-D player, Herb Jones, who's already one of the best defenders in the league, Jose Alvarado, who's liable to have a sneak steal from some unsuspecting point guard every game. I just think they've got a lot of good players. Zion is absolute appointment viewing. And Brandon Ingram also has a chance to elevate himself into sort of top 25, top 20 player status this season. I'm excited to see that. I would be even more excited if one of my favorite sleepers from the draft, EJ Liddell, hadn't torn his ACL in summer league, but he probably wasn't going to play very much anyways. So I'm paying whatever it takes whenever they come to town.
Yeah. I also want to see Herb Jones in person. And for the nerds, I think Trey Murphy also has the potential to be a really good role player. So I don't blame you, even though I roll my eyes at your Pelicans love. My Zion takes are really under threat right now. He looked really good at the media day.
He did. Weight Watchers 2022.
This isn't like one photo that's being recycled around Twitter. This was like a lot of different angles, a lot of different postures, a lot of different jersey tightnesses depending on the angle. And Zion looks like he's in great shape and it isn't BS. So that I hope that's the case. Other than the fact that it'll destroy my podcasting career. All right. A team that I put down is the Detroit Pistons. Because even though I'm a Blazers fan, I live in New York. And so we can get some East Coast action. Pistons, Knicks, Pistons, Nets. Just because I'm so all in on Cade. I said he was going to be a top 25 player this year. So I got to go will that into existence. I really want to see Jaden Ivey in person because I think he's one of these really rare John Wall, Russell Westbrook type speed guys.
That's a good one. I had them written down as well. Also curious to see Jaden Ivey, as you said. And yeah, I didn't end up picking them for my 5 because I actually saw them play the Warriors last year. Cost about $25 to go to the game. It was not an in-demand ticket. But yeah, very curious to see what sort of jumps Cade makes this year. And yeah, they've got a lot of fun young players on their team. My next pick is Cleveland, which I think is partially curiosity about their young guys. I want to see how Evan Mobley looks. I want to see Darius Garland in person. And if anything sort of comes across more watching him live than seeing him on the TV. And then I also just want to see how it works with Donovan Mitchell. What is that backcourt like between Garland and Mitchell? How dynamic is that? And yeah, they've just got this really fun construction and kind of weird construction of a team where they have these dynamic scoring guards, one of whom is very athletic, and then these 2 sort of freakish defensive big men who are kind of going to be cleaning up everyone else's mess. So, and that's also one where it's Cleveland, but it's not like LeBron. Cleveland. So I feel like those prices are still probably going to be a little bit lower than, say, a Lakers game or, a Boston game or something. So I think that's a good pick.
Yeah. Definitely on board with that one. Atlanta. Atlanta's another Eastern team that I thought about. I've also never seen Trae in person, so it all starts with that, the Trae experience. But also, I think that it's pretty rare that you have a team that will have like a super efficient pick, like two different sets of super efficient pick and rolls, whether it's like, any pairing of like Trae and Collins, Trae Capella, or DeJounte Collins, DeJounte Capella, and maybe Okongwu grows as an offensive player. They just have a lot of pick and roll fun on that team. So like, even if it's a regular season game and they're giving Trae a breather, like DeJounte on the floor with the Collins lob threat, or Capella rolling to the basket is just, I think, going to make for really fun, smooth offense. And so I'm excited. I'm not as high on the Hawks as the Hawks are on themselves right now, but I definitely expect Cleveland to be better.
Yeah.
But I think the viewing experience for Atlanta is going to be great.
Yeah. I'm high on the Hawks in a vacuum. And then when I start actually going through teams in the West, I pretty quickly get to, sorry, in the East, I pretty quickly get to like 6 that I think are better than them. So even if they are a better team this year, their seeding and win-loss total might not change that dramatically. But yeah, that's a fair pick. I've had the Trae experience in person. I was at the one game that the Knicks won in that 2021 playoff series. So I didn't quite get my heart ripped out by Trae Young in person. That happened over the television. Like you, I've never seen Luka Doncic in person, so I really want to go see Dallas against Golden State. Western Conference Finals rematch, that's going to be one that'll probably cost a pretty penny, so to speak. But everyone who sees Luka in person says, as strange as it looks on the TV, it is really like just a completely different experience in person when you see how much he's manipulating the game, his physicality, the way that he uses angles, all these different things. So I really want to see that. I want to see the visionary passing in person. I want to see him shaking his head and smiling and trash talking as he runs down the court. He's one of the best players in the league who I've never seen. So I really want to check that off.
100%. Got to see Luka. Quick shout out to the Thunder. If Chet wasn't hurt, they definitely would have been on my list. I mean, I love Shea. Like, Shea alone is a reason to go to a game for me. But I don't want to see a Chetless Thunder team when there's so much talent and so many other places to go. And so the last team that I had on my mind was Minnesota. Let me see how this new experiment is working out. I'm a Rudy Gobert hater, but it makes for great reality television, all the things they have going on there. Anthony Edwards alone is a reason to go see an NBA game. And I think, like, I just want to get a sense in person of the body language, some of the things that producers are not letting you see on television, what happens in the huddles. Can I see the way that these guys are interacting? Are Cat and Gobert buddies? Definitely want to see year one of the Minnesota experiment.
Yeah. Minnesota, also a good pick. I also feel like I'm a Rudy Gobert hater, but I feel like the discourse has swung so far in the direction of hating on Rudy Gobert that I've now become like a Rudy Gobert apologist. Like, the spectrum has shifted so much that I'm either like center or towards pro Rudy, just because I think like he is still a game-changing defensive player. He was surrounded with some of the worst perimeter defensive effort that you'll see in a playoff series for the past few years. And yeah, I'm curious to see what he looks like in this new context where there's kind of another rim protector-ish there's another big person on the floor in Karl-Anthony Towns. And then you'd expect Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels to at least slow down perimeter players a little bit more than what was going on in Utah. So yeah, that's definitely like a weird sort of Frankenstein team that you want to see how the pieces fit together. I do want to give a little bit of love to Oklahoma City. I didn't pick them, but I've really thought about it. Again, if Chet was there, I think it would be an easy pick. But they still have some fun players between Shea, Josh Giddey, who, I'd be very curious to see what his game and his passing looks like in person and the sort of angles that he sees that are not obvious. And then my draft love, Jalen Williams, who I think is going to just be an absolute breakout as a rookie, or just overperform what people are thinking of him. I could very easily see him making an all rookie team and really want to see what that looks like. But the last team, I guess, which I want to give some shine to, or not shine, but who I want to go see just because I haven't seen them in forever, is the Clippers, just because I've never seen Kawhi in person. Actually, I have seen Paul George in person, but I've never seen Kawhi in person. And he just feels like he's been absent from the NBA like landscape for so long that people have kind of forgotten about him. Like I saw NBA rank from ESPN had him outside their top 10, which to me is just nuts because when he plays, he still has an argument to be the best player in the league.
Either omit him or put him in the top 8,
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a very inspired pick, but I want to, and also specifically because I live close to the Warriors, and I think very likely we could see that in the playoffs. Those two teams quite possibly in the conference finals, depending on how seeding works out. I think matchups and seeding are going to be really important in these playoffs because I think my top 3 West contenders are probably the Warriors, the Clippers, and the Nuggets. And I think the Warriors are an absolute problem for the Nuggets. Meanwhile, the Nuggets are an absolute problem for the Clippers, and the Clippers, I think, are a problem for the Warriors with the way they can switch and sort of their size across the board.
You've got a fun rock, paper, scissors.
Exactly. Exactly.
I also, to your point, I think it can be really fun and foreshadowing to see these teams meet during the regular season. Like we saw the way that the Grizzlies Warriors matchups in last year's regular season fueled the fire once they met in the playoffs. The Warriors felt disrespected in their home court, and like there were storylines that had been established before the playoffs even began. So even outside of seeding, like these matchups sort of develop personalities of their own, and so like things will happen. John Wall will be in a scuffle with Draymond, and suddenly that matchup will mean more.
Yeah. Was there anyone else on your list or no?
No, I mean, I like every team in the league is worth watching right now. It feels like I looked at the Pacers just because I love Halliburton and I'm a big Ben Mathurin guy. Like even the Pacers have a couple guys that I'd love to see in person. I feel ridiculous saying Indiana before some of the other teams we mentioned, but like just looking through the list, like of course I want to see Alperen Şengün and Jabari Smith, and there are so many squads that have guys that are worth buying a ticket, but I think the ones I named were a few in that sweet spot of like not the cheapest, but worth, a good bang for your buck.
Absolutely. Quick shout out to Philadelphia as well, because I don't think I've ever seen Embiid in person, but I think that'd also be sort of on the pricier side of tickets. But yeah, no, a lot of teams I'm excited to watch. Of course, I'll go see the Knicks when they come to town, though they won't be the most exciting team to watch. Unless you can get like an Obi Toppin East Bay dunk in the middle of a game. But yeah.
If you get a chance to see KD, Ben Simmons, and Kyrie on a basketball court at the same time, maybe take it, because there might not be many of those games.
I thought about it. about it.
So yeah, I'm interested to see like, what it looks like when Ben Simmons participates in an NBA game again. But I'm from New York, so they were off the table for me. Okay, cool. I think that's all.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. We'll have the top 10 coming in a few days, so everyone can stay tuned for that and see how that shakes out. But yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Peace.